Hey, this is Chris with Destination Art, and there's my cat. He's my constant helper while I paint. So today I am painting a small flower scene. It's kind of it's out of my memory, so it's my own design. It's not off a reference, which if you've watched any of my other videos, I really, 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 really need to use a reference. So what I'm doing though lately is I'm trying to explore using watercolor and being looser with the watercolor. So you see me laying in some background and I'm leaving some white space because that's where I'm planning on putting the flowers. So I actually ended up probably overworking this piece a little bit, which, I'm an artist. That's what we do. So before we get too far into it, though, I have a joke for Violet Connie Art. So how many artists does it take to change a light bulb? All right, everybody think about that for a second. And all right, so I'm coming through and still adding some backgrounds because I want the back to be so I'm trying to have the background really loose and sort of out of focus. And then I am trying to lay in some flower petals right there with light gray. So that is my planning. I'm not using a pencil, which of course, if I had, then, I would have used a reference and yeah, that would have been better. Anyway, so how many artists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is 10. 1 to change the light bulb and 9 to reassure him that it looks okay. Ha. Anyway, that's for Violet Connie Art. Okay, so here we are. I am still working on that. And I'm going to cut, I think I'm going to cut some of this out so it's a little faster. I started laying in some light orange for the flower petals because my idea was that I was going to have light flowers with a dark background. So I started laying in some orange. I cut a little bit of that out, and now I'm adding in a little bit of darkness at the center. So I was trying to use the wet on wet technique that Jay Lee kind of does, and then also Emma, I can't pronounce her last name. Anyway, I was trying to use some of those techniques that I've learned recently and just build up some flower petals with some color. I think it turned out pretty good. I really love the way those petals turn out when on the big flower here coming up. So what I did was lay in a really light wash for the petal and then dropped in some color for the center and some on the outside. So when you do this, you get a really interesting looking effect because if your paint is really, really wet, sometimes you have sort of an outline made. There's a deposit of paint at the edge of the wetness that you put down, which is really cool. I let the painting dry, and then I went in with some dark greens for the background. The goal of this I really love that blue that I put in there. I can't remember what the name is, like phthalo blue, I guess. Oh, love that. Anyway, so I started trying to use negative painting and paint around the flowers so that they would pop out. And part of the challenge when using dark paint is you have less water on there. And then when you start to do things like soften an edge, you really have to watch your water. So water control is extremely important because you'll get some funky results sometimes, which I think that this painting had a few spots that are a little bit not as good as they could be. Of course, every artist is very critical, and sometimes I feel like I'm such an amateur. It's bad. So, anyway, the imposter syndrome. Has anybody ever heard of that? So, yeah, the imposter syndrome that you're trying to do something, but you're just not good enough to do it. So, anyway, so. Using negative painting techniques to paint around the petals and actually sometimes in between the petals so that there's a gap between them. I think it adds some visual interest and also makes the painting look really pretty. Once I had enough darkness in the background, then I started tweaking it a little bit, adding more darks and trying to smooth out and edges and make them look better. Then I had a cat who decided to put his tail right in the middle of my painting. So I went in, I thought that the flowers looked a little flat. So I went in and tried to add a little bit more depth and shadows to the flowers by adding some darker reds to represent the places in the flower that are back a little bit or in shadow. And once the first layer of the attempt to get depth in the flowers dried, then I went back in and actually did it again. So one of the things that's good about watercolor is you can go back in and make mistakes, but the bad thing about watercolor is you can overwork it if you don't get it right the first time. Because like with acrylics or oils, when you paint it, it mostly stays the same. Acrylics will dry a little bit darker than when you put them down, but watercolor dries lighter. And so if you're trying to get darks, sometimes you don't hit the mark. And so you have to go back in. So it's good that you can work it, but it's bad. I always say that watercolor is like watching a 3-year-old, that you really can't take your eye off of it. Anyway, so, okay, here is the final painting. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and have a fabulous day.